Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Michigan Managing Partner of Deloitte LLP and the Chair of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Mark Davidoff.
Good morning, Mackinac. I'm a chair that brings his own chair. So this is the time where we talk about the to-do list from last year, and we give you an update on all that we've accomplished. And so we're going to get into that now and talk about what we had identified last year as a to-do list and where we are. And I'm happy to say that we've gone from to-do to done. However, I would say that, as we all know, we can put a big Roger Maris asterisk after that E, because the fact is we're never done. The work continues, and there's a lot of work ahead. But let's go back to last year and talk about the 4 areas we identified on this stage on Friday. One was to use this stage to elevate and celebrate community organizations and public-private partnerships that make a difference in our community every day. Second was a focus on neighborhoods in 2 ways. Number 1, to support financial literacy, and number 2, to support entrepreneurship in the neighborhoods. And then the 4th area was infrastructure. So let's go through each of these and talk about where we are. First, civic organizations. So I spent about 18 years of my career in the not-for-profit sector, and I know how important it is in making our society what it should be and moving social progress in the right direction. And as you heard yesterday, we're very pleased that we've been able to coin the phrase from Ben Franklin last year, which was doing well by doing good. Right? So last year we talked about the fact that business is not the enemy. Business is actually a partner in all we do in society. And if we could capture that energy of doing well by doing good, we can make a difference. And using that as a platform to celebrate these organizations, and hopefully we'll do this on an annual basis. And this year, as you know, we are celebrating Detroit Historical Society and their very important project on Detroit 67. 50 years ago next year, we will all be marking the moment of what happened in 1967. And the purpose of this exhibit, of course, is to look back so we can move forward and to not leave the learning behind. 1967. The fact is that was me in 1967. I was 8 years old. I grew up in the city of Oak Park, which many of you know is just north of 8 Mile, between Greenfield and Coolidge. And as you might remember, on 8 Mile Road between Greenfield and Coolidge, there was something called the Light Guard Armory, the National Guard post for that area of the city. And the north end of that Light Guard Armory ended at the south end of my street. And so during those difficult weeks of that summer, as an 8-year-old, I stood at the end of my street with my face up against that fence, watching the military go into my city. And I think that if you were old enough then to remember the moment, you're old enough now not to forget it. And it's our obligation to capture what the Detroit Historical Society is doing next year and to not leave that learning behind. We talked about last year the opportunity gap and the need that when Detroit rises, we can't leave a population behind, and not only in Detroit, but across our state. And those lessons are very important, and I'm very proud that the Detroit Historical Society is here on the island with their exhibit in the hall. And I would encourage you to get ready for next year because it's going to be an important moment for all of us. Spirit of Detroit is what we're all about. And if you look at the motto, the logo of the city, there is some Latin on there, and one of the phrases there is marking another moment in history, 1805, when a fire almost destroyed the entire city, and it says, "It will rise from the ashes." And the fact is, in the past 50 years, we have risen from the ashes, but we have a lot more work to do. So I ask you to please take a moment in the hall and visit the exhibit and be prepared for next year as the Detroit Historical Society brings us all to a very important moment as a community. Next, we talked about financial literacy. So as I mentioned, we can't leave a population of people behind in this state as the state rises. And so we dedicated some time last year to this opportunity gap and the ability for us as business leaders to be impactful in this arena. And we brought to the stage an organization called Operation Hope, based in Atlanta, that has as its mission fostering financial literacy across this country, preparing people to be responsible for their own financial well-being and to be able to take care of themselves and their families. And we brought this dynamic individual to the stage, John Hope Bryant. Now, I had never met John Hope Bryant before last year. He and I have become good friends thanks to Sandy's help and his introduction. And I think if you'll recall being in this hall when he was on center stage, it's safe to say he rocked the house. He challenged us in a way we haven't been challenged, and we took that challenge to heart. And very proud to share with you, as you probably have seen already in the press, the fact that Operation Hope has landed big and wide in Detroit. Through the support of Mayor Duggan and the corporate community, John Hope Bryant will be deploying his Hope Inside centers across the city. What is a Hope Inside center? It's an opportunity for individuals in the community, whether it's in their grocery store or a community center or in a bank, to have a counseling session with an individual who can help them understand why their credit score is 500 and not 700. Because John Hope Bryant will tell you that if you don't have a credit score of 700 or above in this country, you can't have a real life. And so by going into an Inside Hope Center, you can take your credit report and you can try to figure out what are the liabilities in that report that are causing me to be 200 points below grade. And through this process, we can help individuals once again find their path to financial independence. Now, I took John to another important institution in our community, Cornerstone Schools, where Deloitte has a very important program with Cornerstone called the Deloitte Career Partnership Program. And John took some time to spend some moments with the interns that we had at Deloitte this year. Fascinating experience for all of us. And then John spoke to the entire high school class. Yesterday we talked about education. And John Racolta is right. These are not Cornerstone kids. These aren't Detroit kids. These are our kids. And we all have a responsibility to do by them the way we would do for our own kids. And when you look at the faces of these kids and the way John Hope Bryant inspired them in an hour-long conversation, every one of those kids deserves the best shot they can have, and we have an obligation to make it happen. Next, we talked about entrepreneurship. Our focus here was micro-lending. Could we take the challenge from Walter Robb at Whole Foods, who, as you might recall a few years ago, said, I'll put $1 million on the table in Detroit for micro-lending if somebody will match it, and figure out how to take what we've done, whole Planet Foundation, around the world in third world countries and bring it to an urban environment on a successful basis. That $1 million sat pretty idle for a few years until last year when Walter called and said, can you help? And Sandy and I jumped in deep. We took a group of Detroiters to Chicago for a day to meet with the Whole Planet Foundation individuals and leaders to talk about the art of the possible. How could you take their challenge and leverage it up, scale it up, and do something impactful in the city? Because the fact is that if you're a seamstress, you're only one sewing machine away from having a business. If you're a carpenter, you're only one tool away from earning the right living. And so how do we, in a very granular basis, allow the citizens in our neighborhoods to be all they can be with the skills they already have? And so that process continues. We have a great group of leaders in this community, foundation-based and otherwise, who are focused on this topic, and I'm hopeful that in the next number of months, there'll be a very important announcement with regards to micro-lending that we'll be able to share with you. Entrepreneurship, of course, again, is a theme that we're talking about today. And we spent some time this year studying entrepreneurial ecosystems around the world. And you might remember last year that I announced from this stage that in November of last year, I was going to be leading a group of CEOs to Israel to study one of those ecosystems. And the point of that is that, as the governor would say, if we can plant the right seedlings with regards to entrepreneurship and incubator ecosystems, we can grow an economy from the ground up. And so we went to Israel, and we had a fantastic experience. I wanted to take a moment, if I could, just to share with you the people in the picture in case you can't see them, because the investment that this group made in exploring this ecosystem in Israel was huge in time and energy. I want to thank Sandy Brua and Doug Rothwell and Scott Kaufman for being my partners in this. But Cindy Paskey and Mark Murray were our co-chairs. We had with us Steve Arwood from MEDC, Beth Chappell, Matt Elliott, Chip McClure, Darren McKeever from the William Davidson Foundation, Rod Miller from the DEGC, Joe Mullaney, Jim Nicholson, Sandy Pierce, John Racolta, Andrew Rush, Nancy Schlichting, Gary Turgo, Evan Weiner, President Wilson from Wayne State, and Larry Wolf. Daniel Howes came as our embedded journalist. And of course, we had a number of spouses and significant others with us as well. And we spent 5 days on the ground in Israel studying this incubator ecosystem, trying to learn how is it that we can create a culture in Michigan. We see it in Grand Rapids, we see it in Ann Arbor, we start to see it in Detroit. How do we connect those ecosystems together so that we can have a culture of incubation in this state to raise our economy to new levels? While we were there, we discovered something else. We took a visit to an organization called United Rescue. And this is a great mix of what we would call entrepreneurship, the use of innovation and technology, and raising up in the neighborhoods. This organization in Israel is a volunteer-based first responder organization that augments official 911 service. By training volunteers and equipping them with a backpack that gives them everything they need to save a life, and using the power of an impactful app like Uber and algorithms that tie into the 911 system, they're able to respond to calls based on who you are, how you're trained, where you are at the moment, and whether or not you should respond to that incident. Last year, they responded to 200,000 calls with an average response time of 3 minutes. Not replacing 911, but augmenting that service to get there first to save a life. Because whether you're in Jerusalem or you're in Detroit, every minute counts if you're having a heart attack. And so we had Nancy Schlichting and Joe Mullaney with us last year on this trip, and they said, pretty amazing, we should bring this to Detroit. And we've had a group, a steering committee, that's been working over the past number of months studying this. We raised some money with the help of DMC and the Henry Ford Health System and others. And this group went to Jersey City a few weeks ago, which is the first U.S. outpost for United Rescue. And we met with the Jersey City Medical Center and the first responders there to understand how they've done what they've done and how it's worked for them. And the work continues, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to bring a proposal forward soon to bring this very important and game-changing activity to Detroit. Let's move on to our last topic, infrastructure. So on this stage last year and for many years before, we talked about roads as the one and only infrastructure problem we had to solve. And the fact is that last fall, the legislature passed and the governor signed a very comprehensive roads bill that will provide funding over time to repair our roads and bridges. We could argue about whether it's enough, but it's certainly a big step in the right direction, and we can declare mission accomplished on infrastructure. Because where are we going? We need roads, right? In this movie, they don't need roads, but we need roads, and the governor has recently charged a 21st Century Infrastructure Commission to look at that in a deeper way and to understand whether or not what we have in roads and bridges and broadband and water is what we need. So we think that we thought we were done last year, and as I said, we declared mission accomplished, and then we got this. So we sit here today with a very difficult situation. We heard Dr. Mona yesterday, we heard the governor yesterday. I had the opportunity to spend about a month in Flint working for Mayor Weaver earlier this year, and it's real. And the fact is we all own it. And the fact is that if you haven't been to Flint, you don't really understand it. So on June 14th, Detroit Regional Chamber, the Grand Rapids Chamber, the Michigan Chamber, and the Flint Chamber as our host will be bringing our boards to Flint for an entire day of education and introspection about the current state and the future state. We'll be spending that day in 3 segments. Number 1, understanding the current state and what is being done to solve the problem. Number 2 is going out in the community and talking to residents and businesses about what they're experiencing and about what they need. And number 3 is an ideation session to allow the business leaders of this state an opportunity to really think about how they can be most impactful in Flint. The fact is that this is our problem, we own it, and we're going to have to solve it. Which brings us to something else we talked about last year, cohesion. How do we speak as one Michigan voice, even in the most difficult moments? The fact is that the world watches everything we do, the world watches everything we say, and the world watches how we treat each other. And in these most difficult moments, whether it's DPS or it's Flint, we have to rally together to be as one Michigan. What happens behind the curtain is important, and we need to have those conversations. But when we're talking to the world stage, we have to have on our game face. Because every time we send messages around the world that we're not ready for prime time, people run in the other direction. So cohesion is a very important topic which we need to continue to bring to this stage and to other venues in your local communities. Which brings us to this topic, responsibility. It's a strange topic, responsibility. You're never really sure if you have it. You're never sure whether you've completed it. And the fact is that if you look at the most complicated tragedies and situations in our history, from shuttle disasters to corporate meltdowns, from O-rings to uh-ohs, the fact is the common thread of these situations, when you look in the rearview mirror about responsibility and you ask, who had it? The question is difficult, but the answer is simple. The answer is way too many people to name, and not any one person. So as we think about things like Flint and DPS, we just got to get on it, and we got to get it done together and have a sense of cohesion about all we do. Because the fact is, we are one Michigan. From shore to shore, we are surrounded by lakes, but we all live in the same pond. And there's a ripple in Flint, we feel it in Detroit, and we feel it in Grand Rapids. And we need to own it together and continue to move our state forward. I'm very proud about the activities we had in the past year. I'm also very proud of Sandy and Dennis and what the program they put together this year. It's been absolutely incredible. Yesterday afternoon was one of the most impactful afternoons I've ever seen in this hall. Emotionally draining, actually. And so I wish you a fantastic remainder of the conference. I urge you to take the learning home with you. If you're interested in joining us on June 14th, please see me or Sandy or the team. We're happy to arrange that for you. And thank you again for your time.